I steadied myself on the icy snow as I walked to my dad's white car. A blizzard has just gone by, and the snowbanks are taller than me. I don't want to see the barn in the distance. The fire happened on Saturday morning. Now it is Wednesday, but the air still smells of singed wood planks and charred metal beams. It stings my nose. Each muscle on my body is tight and tender. Each breath strains in my chest. It is swollen from my gag reflexes clenching up each time I cry and think of the smoke and fire bearing down on my dad. I'm stuck in a dream somewhere between my dad's voice and the sheriff's voice on the phone. A pole barn converted into a small house in the countryside of Phoenix, New York. It was weird to me at first, but my dad made it sound like this barn turned into a house. It was just the quiet place that he needed. Only now it is no longer his peaceful home with his coffee pot by the kitchen sink or the round folding table by the window piled with his library books. In the distance, chunks of debris and cinders cover the front of his home. The rib cage of the pole barn is the only part intact. There's a rectangle shape that was once the front doorway. I see an opening where the kitchen window used to be, the grid wood planks that made up a bathroom closet, and a big opening on the side of the structure. 3 long, red burnt walls of the barn are remarkably still standing. There are 2 windows on one wall, with huge smears of black smoke above them, stains where the smoke streamed out when the windows were blasted open by the explosion, and the heat of the fire escaped. There's a huge gash on the roof, as if the hand of God went in and ripped out the barn's heart. I missed the first calls in the early morning on February 26. The phone rang and rang, and I let it ring again. There's a car in the driveway registered in your dad's name. I got up quickly. I was thinking about the last time I had spoken to my dad. I hunched to the floor before the sheriff could even continue. My dad's face flashed before my mind, his wizard eyebrows, his jack-o'-lantern smile, him hugging me goodbye at the train station, the smell of cigarettes and coffee. Had he been asleep? Did he have time to run? What did he look like now? Is he still there? I asked. My dad would not be moved from the hallway until the investigation was complete. He was still just lying there alone. I wanted to run to him, unearth his body from the heavy scraps of wood and metal. They still needed to legally identify my dad, and the sheriff suggested I wait until after the autopsy. Is there a 2-pocket flannel shirt? I asked. My dad always wore one. It's not like that, the sheriff calmly told me. And then it struck me that the fibers of the shirt he had worn must have burned away. I imagined my dad lying face down, his skin charred, slowly realizing how extreme the explosion and fire was. I was jerked from my thought when the sheriff asked, "Did your dad wear any jewelry? Like a ring?" I asked curiously. He has 2 silver rings. One has an engraving on it like a maze, and one is just a silver band. Yes, there are 2 rings, one with an engraving. I felt nauseous and unsteady. I imagined the quick moments, the tense of seconds before he lost his breath. Ice falling off the roof and cracking the propane line. Gas linking into the barn, trickling the baseboard heater. The explosion that blasted apart the early morning. Firemen struggling to get down the long, unplowed driveway, dragging hoses through 2 feet of snow. And now my boots crunching over the snow are the only sound. He had to wait a few days, but I'm here. You're not alone, I had wanted to tell him. After the investigation, after the medical examiner was finished, after the autopsy, after the cremation was done, I'd be here. I'm bringing him back home with me today to my apartment in Manhattan, in the wooden urn that I ordered a day after he died. He had just only moved into this converted pole barn 6 months ago, and a few months ago I had been here, a day before Thanksgiving, visiting with my dad at the barn. Todd and I had flown in from Manhattan, and after visiting with my mom for a little while, we went to see my dad. And normally when I saw him, we met at the Amtrak terminal station in Syracuse, or the library, anywhere but where he was living at the moment. But now I heard the assurance in his voice and relief. Whenever we talked on the phone, he would tell me stories of his adventures. The stray cat he fed through the fall, the writing he intended to do among the peace and quiet out in the country. He wasn't living with a handful of lunatics, he said. To me, he was safe here. And I carried that thought in my mind while I rambled through New York City each day, to a modeling booking or a photo shoot or casting, or while I sat in Battery Park on a bench and was writing while the leaves were changing color around me. I could focus on other things. Todd and I had met him at the Nice and Easy gas station, and then we followed his car, my dad's car, to his home. We bumped and bounced along the driveway of dirt and leaves, heading down a gradual decline towards a red barn, and we parked our cars side by side. When we stepped out to really hug, the damp cigarette smell on his coat was the same scent he always carried, and he looked good. His glasses held their shape. He was freshly shaven, and his eyes were wide with glee. His teeth were crooked and coffee-stained, and one looked a little loose, but his big smile indicated he was happy to see us. His eyebrows sprouted out wildly, and they rose up and down as he asked us how we were enjoying our new married life. And he joked to Todd to keep me fed. I could be quite cranky when I got hungry. I took in my surroundings, this new place Dad called home. I saw a bowl of cat food outside the barn's front door. The front of the structure had been converted into walls and a standard front door. I smiled and put my hand on his shoulder as Dad fumbled with his keys and opened the door into a home with a big living room area and a kitchen to my right. 2 large windows brought in light through red curtains, making the brown carpeted floor look more like amber. 2 plastic green lawn chairs represented the living room, and near them were a couple of metal filing boxes used as a coffee table. Folding table with a few library books on top sat by the window. He had taken off his coat with a deep sigh, and I knew he was working hard to survive here. Even in the country, he had rent and bills and car tires to replace. He was almost 63, and I wanted him to be able to enjoy the peace that he craved. I saw his signature 2-pocket flannel shirt, pens bursting from the pockets, and he had so much pep in his step that day as he gave us the grand tour. He said he'd be back in a flash and went out to smoke a cigarette. I leafed through an old book about cosmos that he checked out from the library, admiring the bursts of colors in outer space. And then he sat Todd and me down in the better plastic chairs. I stared at his face and his wild eyebrows, as if he was an old professor slouching in the chair, giving us philosophies on near misses, his roads of regret, and the willingness to relive and accept what's been. He ripped out of a notebook a few pages of his writings and thoughts on life and handed them to me. I couldn't wait to read them. We told him about our lives, while he dashed back and forth from the kitchen to us, to the kitchen and back again, offering us more coffee from his old coffee pot and a pack of peanut butter crackers. I held off going to the bathroom, not wanting to miss a word. And by the time I stood up, I had forgotten we were sitting in old lawn chairs. It was quiet here. The sunlight came through the windows. It was warm inside. He was making a better life here. He was doing okay, I told myself. I was wrong. The pole barn is no more. I swallow the freezing air, still filled with smut, burnt debris. I have so much guilt in my heart for him to die here. I remember when Dad confirmed with me on the phone so happily that he received the check Todd and I mailed him for the deposit on the new place in the countryside. I don't try to walk down the long, snowy driveway to the pole barn to get a closer look, or dig around in the piles of blackened or blistered wood. There's nothing left to claim. And I don't feel warm enough in my warmest boots and the 2-pocket flannel shirt I've worn in his memory. I peek into the window of Dad's car, and I reach for the handle of the passenger side door. The doors to the car are unlocked. My dad didn't feel the need to lock his doors out here in the country. I slip into the passenger seat of the car, its shelter protecting me from the cold, and I push a few coffee cups and newspapers aside and just sit there for a minute, among all that's left of his world. The smell of Newport cigarettes and the old attic scent that used to cling to my dad now consumes me. His car was his comfort zone. He sat here every day, a place full of him, his portable office. I've never been in it before. I wish he was here with me, moving his supplies aside and sitting down in the driver's seat, talking to me face to face. I've cried so hard since Saturday that my body feels dry and curled up like an old orange peel. My eyes squint from exhaustion as I look around. I look through scraps of paper, half-broken pens, stack of coffee-stained flyers, folders, envelopes, many other random bits that just look like they belong in the trash. And these are the artifacts of my dad's life. Anything with his handwriting on it catches my eye and is put into the pile of remembrance. Opening the glove box, I discover a pocketbook that holds the car registration and insurance documents. I could hear him telling me about the used snow tires he had just bought and saying how much better he could drive through the snow. I knew how much having this car meant to him, and whenever I sent him cash, he'd leave me a voicemail telling me he would put it towards his car insurance. In one of the cup holders, I see his thermos. The coffee inside is completely frozen, and I smell the rim. I sniff it again. After rehab for his alcoholism, there was a lot of coffee. Whenever I saw him, he'd be holding his thermos or a paper coffee cup. In the other cup holder, I find a pocket knife, a couple keys attached to it, and nail clippers. He gave me a pocket knife like this one when I was 12. My parents had already been separated for a few years. Dad was selling subscriptions for the newspaper. He was living in the greenhouse we had all lived in together. He was telling me how the house was all he had. The DWI came next, joining the others he had racked up. Behind the driver's seat, there are more newspapers, receipts, folders, flyers, a cardboard box next to another cardboard box with jarred foods and cans of tuna fish, peas, corns, applesauce, a bag of frozen oranges. Digging under the food pantry box, I find his old stained Giants hat. I crack a little smile thinking about him wearing it. The smashed hat is damp, and I had seen him wear that hat before. A few years ago, on the day he met Todd. He was my boyfriend then, and we had met at the library in the village of Liverpool. I have a photo from that day, and Dad is looking at me, and he's smiling, and he's wearing this hat. The only difference is that the seams of the hat were together. My fingers touch the brim where he tried his hand sew the worn-out seams back together. Studying this patchwork makes me take a deep breath, because this hat looks a lot like the one he wore to my last high school track meets. It doesn't seem real that I'm touching Dad's old things until I see the sports jacket. It's hanging neatly on the coat hanger of the backseat door. And I smile at his enthusiasm for knocking on doors, handing out flyers, making calls from gas stations and coffee shops to get a lead. Clean, straight lines of the collar and the brass buttons on the sports jacket were part of the pitch. And I think of the medical examiner's words, charring to the muscles on his arms. And I hold up the sports jacket. On the dirt track, when I was a kid, he always said to keep my arms high when I was running. When I press my face into the jacket, the well-worn fabric feels slightly scratchy, and I get a whiff of cigarettes and savor the musty remnants of him. Weeding through more papers in the back seat, I search for anything of worth. I look for handwriting, handwritten notes that share a few of his thoughts, where he was going, appointments he might have had. I find his handwriting all over a flyer attached to a wooden Staples clipboard that he must have used often. His business card is attached to it. I think of all the restarts he had, the attempts that went thin. Among what seems to be more trash in the back seats, I'm surprised to find an orange pocket-sized New Testament. I open it up and find his name inside. Growing up, the name Jesus was something I heard when the car stalled, or when my dad's leg had to be wrapped in a big white brace because of gout pains. Recently, though, he had begun to go to church in Phoenix, New York, and had mentioned he enjoyed socializing during the coffee hour after the service. I'm sure he liked the free coffee and the opportunity to talk about minds comprehending the bigger picture, purpose of all things. Underneath too many papers and trash on the floor, there's a very old brown boondoggle leather wallet that I almost miss. It's the oldest treasure I've found. I made it for him a summer before I turned 9 years old, during a free summer arts and crafts class. It was the last summer we spent as a family. And it was the summer he encouraged me when I was unsure I could run all the way around